What's going on? It's Engineer Mojo here. If you've watched some of my other car videos, you know I'm kind of like the family mechanic. So we have another car in the family that I'm working on today. It's a Honda Accord. Going to be changing the back brakes. And there's a little screeching. So hopefully you guys get some good information out of this video. Okay, as you see, I already have the car jacked up. From the back, I'm using two jack stands supported on the reinforced portion of the frame. As you see, there's a reinforcement here that you apply to jack stands. This is common among many cars, and I have this on both sides as well. And I accomplished this by jacking up the car in the back rear, and I used the tow hitch back here, which is a reinforced section of your car, to jack up the car from the back. You'll see that I jacked the car up before I loosened the lug nuts. That's because I'm using the handy dandy Milwaukee M18 fuel. This is not a paid advertisement. I love this tool. It's my baby. If you don't have an air compressor, this is probably the next best thing. It takes off lug nuts like nobody's business. I take off crankshaft bolts, you know, big 32mm or larger bolts with ease. If you don't have that and you're using a tire iron or some kind of ratchet, you want to loosen the lug nuts while the tire is on the ground so that you have that pressure to keep your wheels from moving. But since I don't have that problem, I'm gonna get started. These lug nuts, it's a 19mm, but if you don't have a metric socket, you can get away with 3/4. It's very close in size to 19mm. And I'll just bust these right on off. So as a rule, whenever I'm doing my brakes, I always do a quick inspection of my suspension, make sure nothing is out of whack, make sure there's not any excessive corrosion or busting of the joints. It's always good if you're under here, take a look. It doesn't hurt. On this job today, I will not be replacing my rotors. Sometimes you can get them resurfaced to make sure you're not putting new pads on a warped rotor, or you get new rotors. But I've already actually checked these pads and they were wearing pretty evenly. And I'll show you what I mean by that when I take them off again. And that's how you can kind of tell pretty much whether or not you need new rotors. It's not always necessary to get new rotors, but everything looks good from here. So I'm going to start taking off the brake components that I need to. This is another tip. I like to stay pretty organized when I'm working on brakes or any kind of portion of the car. Clean workspace usually translate to a clean install. Before I take off the brake components, I set up the brake pads. I apply disc brake quiet, and you can get this from any auto parts store, or you can get the packets of disc brake quiet, or you know, the little goop they give you to make sure that it quiets the brakes when they get brake dust, you know, behind the seals or the pistons. It won't make a lot of noise, extra noise. So I let that set while I'm taking off the brake components. And I ended up getting the CarQuest Gold brand. This is kind of like the middle brand in brake pads. I never get the cheap stuff. I really never get the most expensive stuff. If you're just daily driving, using the middle grade will get you a good set of stopping power and also reduce the amount of noise you'll hear. So cheap stuff, usually you'll get a lot of squeaks sometimes. But here we go. All right, to remove the brake assembly that's holding in your pad, you have to remove these two 12mm bolts, one right here and one right here. As you see, I've already started on one. Remember, these are lefty loosey, righty tighty, so left to make them loose, right to make them tight. Good thing just happened just here. Sometimes when you're trying to remove this bolt, there is a kind of a nut, a backing nut that will want to move with it. Will not make your life easy when removing this bolt. So to hold this still while you're removing that bolt, usually I just apply just a wrench, adjustable wrench there, and I hold it. and this kind of just wiggles away from your brake pads. Pretty simply here. And I rest it right back here on this back trailing arm. So you can see I place it there so you don't have any stress on the brake cable. So there's no stress on the brake cable. I rest it right back on this trailing arm. Just as a reminder, keep everything organized. Brake pads, the bolts I removed, anything I removed I keep together if they were together. I try to keep them in order as far as how I remove them. So the brake pads, they pretty much just slide right off. You can shimmy them off a little bit. You don't want to shake these up too much because brake dust is a carcinogenic. It's not good for you to breathe in, so usually when I'm dealing with brakes, I try to be careful not to make too much disruption around this area, putting up brake dust in the air for me to inhale. As you can see, when I take it off, I always inspect it just to see if I did hear noise, that I'm not crazy that this was the cause. As you can see, there's not very much meat left on this pad, so I'm pretty sure that this was the cause of the screeching I was hearing. I'll go ahead and remove the back side. Just a little shimmy. What I have to do is push this piston back inside the cylinder. I'll show you what tool to use, but before you do that, do this. Up your car hood, locate your brake master cylinder, which is always typically connected to your brake booster if you have one, and you want to remove the cap. Now before I remove the cap, I always wipe it down a little bit, because when I remove this cap, I don't want too many foreign particles falling within the brake fluid, affecting the performance of the brake fluid. So I'll take this off, and pretty much I'll just keep it like this so that air can move in and out of the cylinder. When you're pushing back the piston into the cylinder by the brakes, fluid will want to rise. If this top is on, you'll create pressure within your brake lines, and then that will usually pop a seal within your brake master cylinder, which is not good. But typically you have two options here to move this piston back inside the cylinder. One, you can use a brake tool, which you can borrow from any auto parts store for free pretty much, and that'll make your life pretty easy there doing that. But if for some reason you don't have the tool or access to an auto parts store, at least for these Hondas, you have two options. One, you can use a big C-clamp like this to press it back, but on this particular car, these pistons don't work that way, and I'll tell you why. These have a circular motion that happens when they move in and out. As you see, there's grooves here that you can put a tool into to twist, and if you want these to move back in, you have to twist to the right, righty-tighty. I have some long pliers that I spread out about that wide, and I just twist it to the right. Again, I don't know how clear it is, but there you go. There's the brake cylinder piston. I'll spread these out a little bit, and I put these in there. I'm in there like so, and I just twist to the right. And I twist to the right. I'll hold the piston with one hand, and I'll twist to the right with the other. So hold the brake assembly with one hand, take your other hand, and just twist to the right. And this shouldn't be hard at all. If it's hard to do, that means one of two things. Either you have corrosion within your brake cylinder, or you didn't take the cap off in the front of your car at the brake master cylinder, because that will put pressure in the system and it'll make it hard to twist this. You see, I twisted it back, and now it's pretty much flush with the cylinder. And just another note, sometimes when you buy pads, they'll come with new hardware. This is this metal retaining clip right here. But since these pads did not, you want to keep this in. Also, before I apply the new brake pads, I always clean off the rotor surface. I just wipe it down. You use some kind of alcohol product. This is something that'll pick up any dirt and grease That way you have pretty much a good working surface for your new pads to break in on. Install is pretty much the opposite of removal. The clip part for this Honda Accord goes on the backhand side, and he's going to slide it on there. The non-clip side goes on the front, and again, just going to slide it on there. Take care not to touch the front part of the pads with your hand. You don't want any oils from your hand to get on the front of the brake pad meat part. That compromises the performance of your pads. You also don't want to get any oil on the rotor either. If you do, just wipe it back down. It's no big deal. But that also compromises the performance of your pads. And voila, brake pads are on. Now I will re-put on the cylinder. This process is pretty easy. Just take your pad, slide it back on, back in place. Take the two 12mm bolts that you removed earlier, put those back in place. Sometimes you can have the same issue when you tighten these as you did removing when this back nut wants to move. All you have to do is do the same thing, just hold it in place and tighten the bolt. Alright, the brakes are done on one side. You can just put the wheel back on. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You don't need much help with that one. You shouldn't have if you did your brakes, because you're already a master. The other side is the exact same process, so I won't show you that side, but I will show you what I do after I finish with the brake install. I'm sorry, I fibbed. One tip I would like to say is when I'm applying the lug nuts back onto the wheels, I always blow within the lug nuts and then put them on the threads. That way any kind of dirt, debris, anything like that that may have worked its way into those threads, I can get it out of there. You'd be surprised how little dirt and grime you need to get in there to ruin your threads. Finish both sides. What you want to remember to do now is reapply your brake master cylinder cap. You should see that the brake fluid level did rise slightly. Just screw that back on. Now that you have successfully installed new brake pads in your car, so now what you want to do is take your foot, apply pressure to the brake pedal. It'll be pretty squishy at first. As you pump a few times, you'll build up the vacuum in the brake lines and it'll get stiff again. Typically, after you reinstall brake pads, I usually have to go through a break-in procedure just so that it reduces the amount of squeal that you may encounter if you don't break them in. So usually my procedure that I do when I'm breaking in pads is I'll do this about 6 to 10 times, where I'll take my car up to about 30 miles per hour and then I'll reduce the speed to 15, and then I'll have a little cool off period where I slowly accelerate back to 30 miles per hour and then slowly decelerate by applying the brakes to 15. And I'll do that same process 6 to 10 times. Hope this tutorial helped you. If you liked the video, please like. Any questions, please comment. I love answering questions. Any tips, please comment as well. If you have any tips to give me to make this process a little better for future folks, please let me know. I love to hear extra tips on working on cars. Please share this video as well. And like I always say, usually after most of my videos, I post these to kind of help people out. I use YouTube and it's helped me out tremendously with, a bunch of how-to videos. I'm just trying to pass along the favor. Hopefully this goes smooth for you, and look out for any more tutorials from Engineer Mojo. Peace.